Before this thought, the thought that pipes laid in open trenches disappeared underground, I was quite content to explore dug pits with severed roots protruding from the layered walls and basements covered with slabs. But this thought was something entirely different. One day, walking along a freshly dug trench near building number 52 on Lenin Street, I was surprised to discover that the pipes, which welders had spent 2 days working on, weren't disappearing into the ground, into the sand, into nowhere. I saw that a special concrete trench corridor had been laid for them, inviting me to explore its unknown depths. I didn't go far that day. I wasn't afraid. For some reason, I've never experienced fear of the unknown. It seems I was firmly instilled in a false belief as a child that this world was created exclusively for humans, and that no real danger to life could exist in it. It was simply pitch black. That's when I realized I needed a flashlight and some sense of direction in this unfamiliar place. At the same time, I realized I was pushing against an open door. I discovered that the city was full of manholes, inspection and control manholes, each a door into an unfamiliar world. But I didn't immediately seize these enticing opportunities. Remember, I was young back then. I just turned 10, and I couldn't physically lift the heavy cast iron lid. I started looking for open manholes. To my surprise, there were quite a few. I found them in the area of the clearing, an extension of Lenin Street. The Three Pigs didn't even exist back then. In the forest beyond the railroad tracks near what is now the Stroy Materiali store, and near the garages on Novaya, which, as a street, also didn't exist back then. Metal clamps were welded to the reinforcement bars of the discovered manholes, as if, especially for me, I could easily descend them, illuminating my way with a flashlight I'd gotten for my birthday, and explore the underground labyrinth that opened up before me. To be honest, almost every one of these passages ended in a dead end 10 to 15 meters from where I descended. However, the dead end wasn't always truly impassable. In most cases, the pipes, usually running in pairs, disappeared into an unexpectedly narrowing passage clogged with insulation and other such muck. At first, this stopped me, but one day, gathering my courage, I climbed onto the top pipe. I think it was somewhere near the city lifeguard station, and pressing my face into the fiberglass, crawled forward. My determination was rewarded. After about 20 meters, I felt my clothes no longer cling to the rough concrete surface, and turning on my flashlight, I realized I was back in a passage similar to the one I just left. After walking about 10 meters, I discovered some clamps, and climbing up them, bumped my head against the roof. But this didn't discourage me. I knew I'd found a way to move underground. I can't say my travels brought me only positive emotions. I remember well, as I was making my way from a well in the courtyard of building number 9 on Vasilieva Street, across from the former Zarya cafeteria, which had apparently been opened for repairs, I discovered the half-decomposed and foul-smelling body of some feline or canine at my feet. It wasn't a shock, as I often found rather unappetizing things during my walks, But it was from that incident that I began walking through underground utilities wearing a respirator mask, which I had borrowed from the painters painting the walls, as I recall, in the rented building number 32 on Pobody Street. It was, if I am not mistaken, May or June of 1971. Thank you, dear women. I divided the routes into good and bad, although, say, for you above-ground dwellers, they would all be roughly the same, characterized by two words, dirt and darkness. But some people like to walk from the bookstore to the Pishchevik store along Vasilieva Street, while others would prefer to go through the square, past the Luch store and the department store. So I preferred to get, say, from the inspection shaft near the health center to the shaft at the entrance to the greenhouse of school number 127, the most convenient place to emerge above ground in the evenings. Not through the sewer near building number 11 on Pobody Street. Even on the surface, I constantly imagine it stinks of feces, but through the clean and tidy sewer of the maintenance shop behind Yubileni. When I turned 12, I got the idea to draw a map of the dungeons I'd explored. I knew them all, basically. I have excellent visual and spatial memory. But then I read a book about labyrinths, and drawing plans became my passion. Incidentally, it was then, after observing plumbers at work a few times, that I learned how to open manhole covers. It's not at all difficult. Even a fifth grader could do it, if you know where to insert a crowbar and how to pry the cover. It's hard to believe, but I could lift any manhole cover in 5 seconds, and it took me no more than 5 more seconds to get inside, pushing the cover behind me, not all the way, just enough to create the illusion of closure. So, getting back to the plans. I drew the first plan without going underground. Why? I already knew everything. The city had been explored, dozens of manhole covers raised and lowered, hundreds of hours spent underground, thousands of impressions lodged in the recesses of my memory. My parents, and what parents know what their children do from 1 in the afternoon until 6 in the evening. After 6, I diligently did my homework, watched TV, and even, I remember, went to the Ural swimming pool for a scuba diving class. The class was led by Oleg Mikhailovich, a truly warm-hearted man. I don't remember his last name, unfortunately. Then came Vasya Dmitriev, but I didn't see him there. I digress, although perhaps not. It was at the pool that I realized something simple. The underground network must have other outlets to the surface besides manhole covers and storm drains. More than once in my underground travels, I'd come across large, full-length metal sheets with signs like electrical panel, which I tried to avoid. But then one day, while running through the gym with the guys at the pool, we were trying to spy on the girls in the women's showers. I spotted a door with the same sign in a short hallway on the women's side, and it was slightly ajar. Instantly, all the naked girls vanished from my mind, because behind the tangle of wires, I saw a passage, and this passage reminded me awfully of my own underground tunnels. Something clicked in my head, and the underground plan of the 70 began to take on new, previously unknown details in my imagination. Of course, that day, fleeing from the enraged maintenance worker, I didn't even try to enter the pool control room. I'd never even entered it. But a few years later, seeing that door from the inside, I remembered everything and couldn't help but smile. From that very day on, in my underground travels, I stopped missing the doors I occasionally encountered in the concrete walls of the sewers. Very often, these doors concealed only shallow alcoves or small rooms with one or two shovels, a couple of buckets, and the ever-present fire extinguisher. But sometimes, beyond them, quite respectable corridors began, which, as a rule, led to the basements of apartment buildings or other, more exotic places. For example, who among the city's residents knows that beneath the slabs surrounding the Lenin Monument, there exists a sewer manhole, covered instead by only one of those very slabs, the second one from the left corner. And yet, it was from there that I listened to the ceremonial speech of the first secretary of the City Party Committee on May 9th, 1975, a speech dedicated to the 30th anniversary of Victory Day. Who knows that in the basement of the City Bank Vault, there exists a small door, half the height of a man, behind which the uninitiated will see only a huge valve and rusty pipes. Yet I have more than once squeezed through the narrow gap between the floor and the lower pipe and stood holding my breath, listening to the metallic clang of bars and safe doors above my head. Who supposes that most ground floor apartments in old buildings can be easily entered by lifting the kitchen flooring? I didn't do this, but many of the family secrets of the residents of these apartments were not secrets to me. A person of a different disposition in my place would probably have been captivated by precisely this, the opportunity to know everything about everyone. But fortunately, this prospect did not appeal to me. And when I encountered young women who'd gotten pregnant out of nowhere, or sweetly smiling married couples who'd just the day before been hurling the choicest curses at each other, I felt no superiority. Admittedly, I felt awkward too. I'll admit right away, I was incredibly lucky to have started going downhill at such an early age. Back then, I could squeeze through crevices that would become inaccessible to me 5 years later. Had I first encountered such obstacles at 16, I probably would have given up on it. But by that age, I knew plenty of shortcuts and was confident that I could get anywhere if I wanted. Yes, I deliberately didn't mention another type of room hidden behind the doors I encountered. These were short, dead-end corridors, usually about 8 meters long, leading nowhere and connecting to nothing. They were striking in their relatively good finish and their utter uselessness. They had another peculiarity, which I didn't immediately realize, but eventually did. Sometimes in these corridors, or more precisely beneath their floors, a measured, distant hum could be heard.